And we are live now, folks. So, hey, folks, this is me, Vishwas Nayan, and I'm with Suaditya, and we are here to talk about an open source ecosystem as well as how ML is being nurtured in this field of state of mind because I everybody is talking about hey Grok from Neuralink is this Chat GPT is going to a new level, it's getting trained to a new model. I'm like, it's learning from us, by the way. It's learning from us and we are teaching it. And that's not the end of the story. There's a lot that goes behind when we talk about frameworks, when we talk about building models. Yes, not every time that you train the same data set on the same code you still find the same accuracy. There is always a catch in it. And deploying model at scale, I work at a firm which has so many MLOps use cases, ML use cases. Everything is on Kubernetes. By the way, the Kubernetes is the modern age version of hypervisor. So don't worry about it. We'll be coming out with a lot of things. And I'm with my guest, Suaditya, who's going to share you about a lot of insights about ML ecosystem. He's too young. He's my junior, but he has a lot of insights. So yeah, over to you, man. Let's get it started, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Uh, right. So let's have a chat because machine learning has been a very happening field now. Because I think since ChatGPT came out, there has been like a renewed interest in the field. If one looks at AI as a timeline, you'd see that there have been winters of AI where there has been no research or very minimal research. But over the last, maybe let's say Q1 2023, you'd see that there has been a severe boom in not only interest but funding, research, and all the other different kinds of possibilities that are being enabled by AI. So I think that if someone is looking to enter this field now, or if someone is interested in understanding how these things work, now is a great time to start. So I think that's one of the most important factors that comes into play when we talk about ML engineering in today's age.
All right. So I think there has been a lot of shift that's happening, right? It's not about there are companies which the day they released a new LLM model, they raised a multi-million dollar
Yeah,
value funding. And I'm
yeah,
like, LLMs are taking it to a whole new level. Large language
absolutely.
model. I'm not into NLP. I'm not into ML now, but when I see ML ops use cases coming on Kubernetes, there is always an
Hmm.
edge that TensorFlow brought to us, right? When
Yes.
2019, I saw TensorFlow 2.0 beta getting released, and I was in my college and I was giving a session, and somebody told me, "What will TensorFlow 2.0 bring something new?"
Yeah.
I'm like, I also don't know. And I saw TF function,
Yeah.
and I've silver TF functions, and I fell in love with TF functions. So that's how it is.
Absolutely.
So the question is, how is ML ecosystem evolving with respect to frameworks? Because you work at a company called as Ivy, and Ivy has been pioneering its own way in a lot of open source product as well, and we are open source as well. So how
Hmm.
is Ivy making an impact, and how are you studying the framework open source market that you're seeing right now?
Right. That's a very detailed question. I think in the current context, machine learning frameworks are literally the bedrock of everything that you see around you, right? When it comes to machine learning, you have the different LLMs, you have ChatGPT, you have Llama, you have Alpaca, and all these different kinds of models. But at the end of the day, we need to realize the fact that these are, well, quite literally programs, and they have been written by someone in one of these frameworks. It's either PyTorch or TensorFlow or Cafe or some kind of framework, but at the end of the day, it is a product of code, right? So I think in terms of open source frameworks, machine learning is literally thriving on it. Without open source frameworks, you do not have machine learning, because the entire essence of machine learning is captured through open source development. If one might have come across a few days back, an internal Google memo was released where they claimed that there is no moat for Google. and neither is there a mode for OpenAI. And I think that stands a testament for what is going on right now in the ML ecosystem, because all major players, as well as smaller research laboratories, teams, or other folks, are realizing the power of open source when it comes to machine learning, and understanding the fact that without any kind of collaboration, advancements or research increments cannot come about. So I think if once that realization is internalized within companies, and people build around open source and not close off their research or close off things, you will see a much more renewed growth of machine learning. So I think open source ML frameworks are evolving very quickly. If one looks to, I think, March beginning or something of that sort, TensorFlow came out with version 2.12, for example. And and as the time is going on, you see more features being added, more optimizations coming across, more user experience wise, you have a better increment at every iteration of development, and things are just getting better and better, and we do not have an idea of where that limit comes, where it stops, because after all, at the end of the day, this is software, and software does not really have an end, right? So I think, coming back specifically to your question, the evolution of ML frameworks has only gone upwards, and it's only going to go upwards. There is no stop to it. uh, Specifically when it comes to Ivy, let's say, Ivy has been working towards merging these frameworks, because, as I mentioned, these frameworks are what is being used by different laboratories, companies, and so on. But if we really want to enable open source development and make sure that everyone is at the same page, we need the same medium, we need the same language, and we need the same tools that everyone is using. Different tools causes internal fragmentation, and that is what we at Ivy are trying to solve here. So when you have, let's say, for example, let's take stable diffusion being written by Rombach et al. From Stability AI. Those folks wrote their entire code in PyTorch. Now those folks, if today we have to convert stable diffusion into a different framework for any reason, let's say I want to deploy it now, PyTorch isn't exactly
Optimization or reduction in the training.
exactly exactly. So in that case, TensorFlow is pretty much a front runner. So in that case, one would look towards converting. But then again, that is a major engineering effort, trying to convert research papers or research code into engineering or production ready code.
Yeah.
So it's a major problem. So that is where a bridge is required, and I think that's where Ivy is finding itself to be a market leader in.
Dude,
So that's the idea.
it might sound very hilarious, but I am old, by the way. I'm kind of old. Like, I don't know why. I can say that I'm old. This is the same meme that happened on 2017 when I joined engineering. This was the meme
Acha.
which was just getting floated out everywhere. But
Yeah,
what? There is always a trend that is being said. We might say
absolutely.
ChatGPT as one of the things, or OpenAI models. OpenAI was absolutely, and ChatGPT 3 is still 25th. You
Yeah.
know what? Exactly a year before, I did one podcast with an person who works on NLP, and he told me the right now the ChatGPT is number 14. And just think about it, Alibaba has already cracked the
Hmm.
market. But it's not
Absolutely.
about scorecard that is just given to you. We always say that, right? Your
That's just
mark.
one part.
Yeah. But the fun part about all these models is these are deployed in the production in their process. But ChatGPT has made an impact because the model is much more accessible.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because this is good. Roberta is good. Of course, Roberta is also an open source
All.
one which everybody is using
Hmm.
it. And
Hmm.
of course, I saw one more. Vega, I don't know, dude. Vega, I've never worked on. But when you see all these things, ChatGPT 3 is still the It was actually 14th last year, and
Yeah.
it's now 25th. Just think about what happens if BERT starts training. Like, I just have one example, okay? So this is just a simple example of a visual transformer, which is
Hmm.
we are talking in terms of giving that more accessibility. We are
Absolutely.
talking in terms of giving an absolute pleasure of using something which is available to me in the market
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
bringing out a solution. But it is not the only solution that we can work upon, right? I
Hmm.
did some predictions here. Like, you just see it right now. What happened to this image was it was not saying it's Rafael Nadal. It was just traversing to the racket
Yeah.
that was the number here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that means even though the model is accessible, even
Hmm.
though the framework is accessible, that doesn't mean that you're winning in the game of technology. I think the moment you think you have an accessibility of all the resources for the market, I think that is where you're doomed. I think ML is all about improving every single day. Like
Yes. Yes.
like
Absolutely.
there's a simple example of how my obsession towards marketers. This is one of the models where they are already coming up with long-term memory of for AI. That means this is a new company which raised a Series B of 100 million, and this happened because within a week, and that means everybody is betting on something AI. It's not something like okay, everybody is betting
Yes.
on somewhere even in the Kubernetes world. Like what I was seen as there is a company which works on disaster recovery, and everybody says, "Arey, we don't have to have a disaster recovery because
Hmm.
it's Kubernetes, it's managed by cloud." But the guy who has gone through the phase where he
Process.
had the disaster, he now comes back and deploys it. Pinecone was nothing, but today Pinecone is valuated at $750 million, and they have already raised funds. The worst part about it is ChatGPT is very new in the market. Deep Learning.ai is already giving out prompt engineering courses out
Prompt
there.
engineering courses. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
like, I'm like, how fast is content delivery? If you even think, Pinecone has at least 56 employees and things like that.
Yeah.
11
Lemon
Labs
labs.
is already bringing out models with 11 employees, with some amount of employees. Probably there is one HR, probably there is
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still amazed by the fact that even less amount of people are having more amount of an impact. I think it's all the evolution of
Absolutely.
studies. It's all the evolution of a lot of things. I think whatever you
Absolutely.
told about in terms of IB's contribution, where you test the models every single day, you train them, and you also help other corporations
Hmm.
inculcate that help. But let's just move on with all these information that we gathered towards
Hmm.
building model, because when I start building model, there is obviously memory outages, this and
Yes.
that. Memory is not that well. We have to change the batch of
Hmm.
the input data, this and
Yes.
that.
Yes.
There's a lot of
Absolutely.
things that's happening. But how is today's modeling process changing? Because when I think about somebody who's deploying a model on Kubernetes, I always think, is it required? Or else is it required in order
That's
to make your
hmm.
business logic up and running? So the question is, how far is an maturity in the model building process when it comes to training a petabyte scale data set or else stream data set or whatever it is?
I think one of the most important questions that any company or any team that is trying to deploy machine learning in their business logic needs to answer is whether it's really required. Because when you make that decision, the first thing you need to realize is the fact that machine learning is a game of probability, right? So you are moving from a deterministic method of, let's say, performing some kind of action to a probabilistic method. Does it give you benefits is the kind of analysis that teams need to first do. Once that is done, then we need to start looking towards the data problem. Now let's say, for example, you mentioned petabyte scale data. Now when you have petabyte scale data, even the smallest changes can cause large optimizations. For example, if you look at Andrej Karpathy's Nano GPT, he was training Nano GPT, and he changed the context embedding sizes from a random number to from some random number to a multiple of 2, and that gave him a training boost of I think 3 to 4%. And now 3 to 4% on a petabyte scale data set is massive, right? So when that comes into place, it becomes important to look for any kind of small changes or tweaks that can bring about a large change. For example, I let me just look that up. Yeah, perfect. So I
You
gave
can
it.
just show your screen.
Yeah, I will share that. um, right. So for example, if we look at deployment, right? Deployment, it becomes important to make sure that all of the components in your deployment are very easily interchangeable, and that you don't need to worry about making sure that everything works fine. They need to be compartmentalized, and you can, so that you can make sure that you can remove something and put something else in place very easily. You don't need to worry about uh, any breaking changes or something, so that if there is one by any chance, you can very quickly revert. Version controls become important in your development phase. And another very important factor that comes into play is testing, because let's say today we look at models that may have different kinds of biases. It becomes important to find those biases and crush them. So, for example, if we look at this little repository of mine that I made a while back, uh, I think that one very simple way to start when one is just starting, and I'm not going directly to production grade just yet, but a very important step one is to basically try and dockerize your application. Once you make an image of your application, you can practically scale it to any kind of workload with Kubernetes, right? So I think it becomes important to understand where you can find those optimizations. I had this piece of thing where I was trying to deploy this Docker image on Google Compute Engine. I was doing with a simple Compute Engine and Vertex AI combination. But along these lines, as I mentioned, it becomes important to make sure that you have built-in processes in place such that your application is trustworthy, such that it doesn't make any kind of mistakes as much as possible. Because again, we are back to a game of probability. So it becomes important to make sure that everything is in perspective. So that
Sure.
becomes an important thing.
Sure, whenever I used to get one pixel tags, in any of the computer vision data,
Yeah, yeah.
I used to play with one of the notebooks that I have.
Hmm.
I'll just show it to you right now. It's a simple notebook. It's not a complicated one. I was
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
seeing it. I just
Adversarial attacks.
the magic about this notebook is almost old as my engineering degree.
Right.
But some tweaks here and there. I've been training models from
Hmm.
quite a bit of time.
Hmm.
Now when I look back at all these notebooks, it's still running. I'm like, I started tweaking all these and I started giving notes. The way you can even think about frameworks is challenging, right? This is
Yeah.
one of the notebooks where I think there is Azure Cognitive Services by Vishwas.
Yeah.
I think I
No,
had shared with
that
you.
actually highlights a very important thing. You see, even when it's an old notebook, it's working all fine. That is
Yeah,
a very important thing to notice, because machine learning frameworks have always prioritized backwards compatibility a
backwards.
lot. So that is
So
something I feel other frameworks could use a lot.
yeah, I think TensorFlow 2.0 is a magic in that. Like
Yeah,
after 2.1 something version,
yeah,
it's all maturity of being backward
absolutely,
compatible rather than just thinking forward every time. Like
absolutely, absolutely.
this is just a simple notebook, which is just combining what are the pixels that is there
Hmm.
here and everything. But the whole essence of training anything on computer vision is you still pixelate the data into 28 cross 28. If it's CNN or if it's
Hmm.
DNN, it depends on the input of the data. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, what your computer sees is this. It's just weights and biases. And The other factor that obviously comes in is this, right?
the, the
You are
patterns.
putting in the filters, you are putting in a lot and lot of things. So let's just not deviate the topic from whatever we had for training, but let's just talk about inferencing at scale, because I know training is very,
A
very
different problem.
and critical part of any model building
Yeah,
process. Anybody can say I know TensorFlow, but the moment you are given a real world data, it's a complex puzzle, and
yeah,
what a CNN sees is completely different than what you see as a human being. So now
absolutely.
let's just say, of course, you have seen in Ivy there is a lot of inferencing that goes on. You do a lot of stress testing on an ML application. That means you induce noise into the data and you start training. And how does your Ivy framework evolve with respect to the accuracy it can deliver over a course of time and a lot of things.
Hmm.
So, how important is an inference engine inside any of the machine learning practices that is going on? Probably inferencing is one of the less talked aspects in today's world.
Yes, yes. I think inference is practically, after training. I think inference is the most important problem to solve, because if you look at ChatGPT, okay, that models of a similar kind have existed all before ChatGPT. Maybe not of the same quality, but they have existed, right? What got ChatGPT across the line was the fact that they could provide inference at scale. They could provide an interface where people don't get very intimidated by what's happening. So I think inference and quality inference through a very strong user experience is what companies should target and people should target as a whole. Now, when it comes to machine learning frameworks, many frameworks have dedicated inference, resources. Like if you look at TensorFlow, you have the TensorFlow extended pipelines and so on, where you have different kinds of technologies that will help you make your entire pipeline as smooth as possible, right? Now, for example, at Ivy, it is an important problem that we're trying to solve. We are trying to, have ideas around how we can look towards integrating other inference engines. Like if you look at TensorRT or maybe something like OpenAI Triton, these are important aspects of any ML pipeline. And if a framework looks towards being adopted, inference becomes an important checkbox that companies will look towards. So I think, from a point of importance, inference is a problem to solve. It has not been solved yet, because even if you look today, there are models that will take years and years to give a very simple solution. If you actually use GPT on a raw level, you'll see that every inference request will take around a few minutes on consumer hardware, at least. If you have GPUs that are data center grade, that's a different problem. But the day you want to see machine learning being democratized, the biggest solution to that is inference on consumer hardware, and that too easily. So I think that's where the value lies when it comes to what I was doing.
Yeah, dude. Like I still remember one of the clients in my previous organization. It was a deployment on JUnicorn drivers, and there were Triton drivers. They were experimenting with it, and the worst part about their architecture was it was on VMs, and they highly believed in VMs,
Right.
and it's a monolith, by the way. It was
Okay.
never a serverless. There was
Right.
they were it's an AI ML company which worked on uh, something as good as ChatGPT, but they had their own inferences. They had their own model out there. And the best part about their thing was the model were deployed with a lot of responsible and secure AI principles. That means
I see.
the model stayed on their server, and there was a backend API which was given to them, and that was being served to the AWS amplifier. A lot of things were happening. So I think whatever you talked about with respect to a traditional hardware, it's always a complexity that comes up. Like TF Lite can be as good as what it can work on you
Absolutely.
say Raspberry Pi, but still there is an urge for us to deploy an FT model onto a Raspberry Pi as well. Like it can be
Absolutely.
as good as Onyx coming and making a lot of impact in your life. So,
Yeah.
we had a little bit of a discussion because inferencing is something that is way more complex than what you can
Yeah.
think about. Even training a model is absolutely fine, but testing it is also absolutely fine because you still go ahead, you still put in the data set, which is in the same
Hmm.
constraint compute, but in production, it still differs. Like, I have a Samsung mobile, which is like pretty old, like,
Yeah.
it's as old as me, I think so. So yeah, like I feel everything is older than me apart from my mouse and keyboard. So that is what I feel. But
Right.
the challenge has always been, can we make sure the customer evolve because we are deploying the high end model, or else should we also think about the people like me who are still going old? So there is a lot. So now let's just think about that in a fashion where GPUs are already available and everything is
Hmm.
set and
Yeah.
everything is already available for us. But deployment at scale is a very big challenge. I know you have not worked at that scale where you have seen an
Hmm.
inference where I've also not worked in that scale where, but with our experience that we have, like anybody who's watching the stream can obviously come back to us and they can obviously correct us, or else we can obviously
Hmm.
have a second round
Hmm.
of a discussion. Don't worry about it, we are also learning at any given
Hmm.
point of time. So scale has been defined because Kubernetes came in, everybody started talking CPUs and RAM, and back then it was just VM procurement and running the framework out there. So
Hmm.
now, with your experience of dealing with and deployment at scale, how do you feel? Are we doing it right? That is the first question, is what we get it, because deployment at scale is very complex. And
Yeah.
also, what do you feel are the challenges that we might face when we think about deployment at scale? ChatGPT is fine. Everybody
Hmm.
is using a lot of tokens, this and that. It's
Hmm.
absolutely cool that you're paying for OpenAI, but let's just answer these two questions. So, are we doing it right? And also, what are the challenges that you feel that we might face at the inferencing at scale and also deployment at scale?
I think both your questions have a very linked answer, right? We are doing it wrong, and we are doing it wrong because we always reach out for the most complicated solutions, right? I think I'm gonna agree with something that folks like Andrej Karpati as well as Kelsey Hightower have said, that you don't need to reach for the most difficult or the most complex solutions just because they look fancy, right? Sometimes a deployment on a very basic level is far better than something that you deploy on, let's say, Kubernetes. If for example, I think 2 or 3 days back itself, Amazon Prime Video released a blog
Article
where,
on they go monolith.
yes, microservices or monoliths. And I think that is something that we should look towards inculcating in the ML side of things as well, because microservices are okay. Like, you have a very good infrastructure around microservices. They are very composable. They are very independent of each other. That's all great. But when you're at scale, things change. It's like the difference between quantum physics and normal day-to-day physics. Things change when you change the scale, right? So I think deployment at scale is a problem that we as normal folks can't really relate to very easily. We can only have faint guesses or ideas, but the folks who are actually working at those companies, working day in and day out on those problems, are the ones who are far more qualified to answer those questions again. But that being said, I believe that when it comes to deployment at scale or inference at scale, uh, again we have to look towards trying to democratize the solution. Having one backend to serve like a million customers is not an ideal solution at all. When it comes to machine learning, when it comes to difficult solutions like the kind of models that we run today, those require a lot of computing resources, and doing it on one backend or like one specific set of machines is quite challenging and draining on the company's resources as well, which is why I kind of advocate towards democratizing when it comes to, let's say, as you mentioned, TF Lite. TF Lite becomes a very interesting solution because now you've moved all computation from your end to the user's end. This not only has implications on your developer, experience, where you don't have to sit and maintain those huge backends. One day you have some problem coming in on one node or something of that sort, but you shift also in terms of ethical and responsible AI, where you're not sharing any kind of information. All information stays on device for the user. That is something that needs to also be taken care about at scale. If you are doing some kind of smaller operation where you have, maybe hundreds or thousands of users, that I mean, not that it's small, but that's a comparatively smaller operation, and at that level you can think about some tweaks that you can perform. But again, at a large planet scale deployment, it becomes important to also keep in mind the ethical responsibilities and the normal deployment through consumer devices.
Hmm. But I have seen some sort of an deployment where you know I think that's the best part about working in a service-based company. You see a lot and
Things.
lot of things which are happening, and you
Yeah.
experience a lot of people.
Yeah.
So according to my experience, I think it's okay to isolate ML from your regular microservices.
Yes.
It's okay to isolate ML from your regular microservices because the way the article of Prime Video is, because they're not moved everything as a monolith. Like, it's
Yeah.
also there are some services which are already there. That means
Yeah.
they still believe that there is an improvement that we can do, and they're still figuring it out.
Hmm.
Because when you look at something as a deployment at scale, the first thing that comes at is, should I integrate in this service or should I also integrate in this service as well? Because
Yes. Yes.
your search can work absolutely fine with Elasticsearch being on your one of the clusters and you're
Hmm.
configuring it out there. And what you still have is an data which is coming out. It's a search engine on your entire database, and you can still
Yes.
start working, which is scalable, which is absolutely fine, which is ML implemented, but you don't see the ML component.
Yeah.
Let's say you want your own search kind of an engine and you want everything to be there. Like, let's say
Hmm.
you type in the search and you say,
Hmm.
hey, Vishwas Narayan as a YouTuber. Or let's say Vishwas Narayan from Devtron. So that makes a lot of sense when there is a context of business coming in. It's
Yeah.
okay to isolate those services and put in a lot and lot of microservices, because there's a use case from Zerodha. Like, they always say, why should we push out the notification? Like, you see, and you see
Yeah.
other trading apps, they send every single day there's a message out there, hey, Sensex is going at this point of time. But Zerodha has only spent something as good as 11 push notifications in a year, and that means they have saved so much on cost. They have saved so much on maintaining what
Absolutely.
has been done. That means you need not have to complicate your deployments. You need not have to
Hmm.
say, oh, you know what, we are going to be ML this and that. It's okay. If you believe in ML, go with it. If you don't, isolate it, test it out. If it works out, just do it. If not, leave it out.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
how it is. So it's always decision making process that comes into the
Hmm.
picture. But
It is.
deployment at scale, it's chaotic. Like, Kubernetes can be hacked. That's one of the white papers or the research paper that comes out, and everybody says we are not secure. And that's how industry is, right? There's nothing called as ethical AI coming into the picture. The ethical AI is just model getting isolated. Responsible AI is about utilizing the data and the model the right way. And I think we have covered a lot. We have a lot to discuss. We have a lot to discuss in terms of code. Yes, we are coming out with sessions with code, and also we are also coming out with sessions where we brainstorm with a lot of panelists and we come out with some diagrams. I'm learning from my new graphic tablet, which is I just
That's
got a new
awesome stuff.
graphic tablet. I'm still learning from it, and of course, probably an ML Ops bootcamp, which is saying about how to deploy a model and everything. We are doing it. So give us some time. I think we'll just get everything sorted out there. And thank you so much, Swaditya, for being on the show, man. It means a lot.
Absolutely
Let's
glad
catch
to
up
be here.
somewhere down the line this month end or next month.
Sure thing.
Let's just start talking something ML.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Great pleasure.
Yes. Let's just end the broadcast now. And this is Vishwas Nayan signing off from this podcast. See you soon, folks.